At the DFR lab, we have been analyzing disinformation and digital influence campaigns around the world with a special focus on the pre-election period for more than 2 years. What we have learned over those 2 years is that the challenge of disinformation sits at the heart of 3 coalescing vulnerabilities: technological, cognitive, and societal. Now, what do we mean by these vulnerabilities? Technological vulnerabilities refer to algorithmic bias, unchecked automation, and gaps in data privacy. We often speak of technological platforms as neutral conduits, but they are persuasive by design. The main goal of a social network is to ensure that you stay on their platform for as long as they can persuade you to do that. And what social media algorithms have discovered along the way is that the kind of content that encourages you to stay on their platform very often is inflammatory and extreme. As a result, when you look up videos on, for example, the flu vaccine on YouTube, very often you get recommended videos that are about conspiracies surrounding the vaccinations that are mandatory in most countries. We ran an experiment on Facebook recently where we liked one hyper-partisan news outlet, and what Facebook's recommendation algorithms did, they immediately started suggesting that we like similar hyper-partisan news outlets, and within 5 minutes of just clicking whatever Facebook suggested we do, we found ourselves in this echo chamber of really hyper-partisan news outlets publishing their information on our Facebook wall. This is really important because 30% of our behavior online is determined by these recommendation algorithms. So if 30% of our behavior is determined by recommendation algorithms that are suggesting we follow, enjoy, or like the more extreme content, we have a problem of essentially automated radicalization. Apart from that, social networks have distorted the publishing and the digital advertising industries, and have completely revolutionized them. And in turn, it has lowered the barriers to enter our information environment for both state and non-state actors alike, making disinformation a low-cost, high-impact means of attack or exploitation. Just to illustrate, for the price of an F-22 fighter jet, a state or a non-state actor could purchase and serve 500 ads to every person in Lithuania with access to the internet. Now, why would anyone ever want to fight a war when you can just buy 500 ads and persuade the population of a small country to vote in one way or another in a parliamentary or presidential elections? Now, it's really crucial to understand that these technological vulnerabilities are powered by our own cognitive biases and shortcomings. More specifically, our decision-making, belief, and behavioral biases. Some examples of these include confirmation bias, popularity bias, blind spot, or shared information bias. These cognitive biases are very often overlooked when we talk about these issues. But if it wasn't for the faulty ways in which we are thinking and consuming information, the problem of disinformation wouldn't exist, at least at this scale. Lastly, we have to acknowledge our societal vulnerabilities, such as socioeconomic inequalities, ethnic or religious tensions, lack of societal cohesion, and political divisions. Because those are the vulnerabilities that give our adversaries, be it domestic or foreign, a way in and their talking points. So when these 3 vulnerabilities interact, they help create a toxic information environment where disinformation and the so-called fake news can spread very freely, chipping away at the foundations of our democracies. So to date, we have, at the DFR lab, monitored more than a dozen elections around the world to make sure that disinformation and digital influence campaigns didn't have an impact on the outcome of these elections. And what we have discovered is that the threat of disinformation and nefarious use of influence campaigns across the globe is extremely universal. And the way in which social media has been exploited ahead of elections is very similar across the globe. Here's a list of the most common tactics that have been used when it comes to social media ahead of elections to distort the outcome of them that we have observed over the last couple of years. So the 2 tactics that have had the most significant impact when it comes to both short and long-term disruption that we have observed are doctored or out-of-context videos, and sock puppet accounts. So that we're all on the same page, a sock puppet account is an account, a social media account that's run by a user who is pretending to be someone else online. So for example, if I had a Twitter account where I pretended that I was a taxi driver in India, I would be managing a sock puppet account. Now let me show you 2 case studies from our work that illustrate the threats that these 2 tactics in particularly pose to our elections. So to date, the American elections are still the most comprehensive case study that we have of how social networks can and have been used in challenging the outcome of the elections. How many of you are familiar with the @10_GOP account that was very popular on Twitter ahead of the elections? No one? Okay, well, let me tell you a story. There was a very popular Twitter account in the lead up to the American elections that had more than 40,000 followers and was very frequently cited on pro-Trump forums, including the Donald subreddit on Reddit. It was even retweeted by Trump administration officials, and the tweets that it was posting would get 10 or 20,000 retweets and likes. The account was suspended in 2017, and when that happened, conservative and alt-right influencers raised a storm on Twitter, accusing Twitter of silencing conservative voices and essentially censorship. But the reason why this account in particularly was removed from Twitter wasn't because of conservative censorship. It was because this account that had a significant influence on the discourse of American elections in the lead up to the presidential elections of 2016 was run not out of Tennessee, as it was saying, but St. Petersburg. So this was an account that was run by the Kremlin-sponsored Troll Farm, which is an institution tasked with infiltrating online conversations in Russia and beyond. Now, this shows that individuals and influence actors running these sock puppet accounts can have an outsized effect on our political discourse in the lead up to the elections, as long as we continue to rely so extensively on anonymous social media influencers for our own political opinions and thoughts. So we have to stop doing that. Another powerful disinformation and influence tactics are doctored or out-of-context videos, which I think are especially relevant for organizations like ENEX. And I think there's no better case study for that than the Moldovan local elections, which took place in June 2016. So 1 week before the elections, we found that this video was trending on both Facebook and Odnoklassniki, which is a Russian social network. And now, the video was a short clip from Al Jazeera News in Arabic, and the uploader of the video provided subtitles in Romanian language. Now, according to this video, at least the subtitles, the video was about a pro-European candidate who wanted to be the mayor of Chisinau, which is the capital city of Moldova, has agreed to lease the city of Chisinau to the United Arab Emirates for 50 years. Now, we found it to be very suspicious, so we decided to investigate whether or not the translation was accurate and if the video was doctored in any way. Now, we found the original video, and we realized that there were several visual discrepancies between the 2 videos. So in the original video, what we can see here is an armed man in the photo, whereas in the video that went viral in Moldova, what we are seeing is a sign of the city of Chisinau. We then translated the video from Arabic to English and the viral video from Romanian to English and compared the transcripts. And what we found was that in the original video, the news anchor was talking about the bilateral relationship between the United Arab Emirates and Yemen, whereas in the video that went viral, the anchor allegedly spoke about this pro-European candidate in Moldova who has agreed to lease the city out to the United Arab Emirates. Now, the story perfectly exploited the 3 vulnerabilities that I spoke about earlier. So the people or organization behind this campaign exploited Facebook's algorithms, which give preference to videos over text and allow users to upload subtitles track without checking if it is accurate. It also exploited Moldovan society's somewhat Islamophobic views that were coupled with authority bias, whereby viewers are more likely to attribute greater credibility to the opinion or a report that comes from a figure of authority, and in this case, a news program. Now, although it's tempting, lastly, I forgot to mention. So this video, it was published 1 week before the elections, and it got 700,000 views on Odnoklassniki and Facebook. And when we published an article debunking this video, it was only read by 2,000 or 3,000 people. So that shows you the kind of impact it can have, because this is the kind of content that goes viral, whereas the fact-checking content that we are producing doesn't tend to go as viral that often. Right. So although it's tempting to think that Kremlin is the only actor that is willing and capable of exploiting these vulnerabilities to achieve their objectives, it's far from being the truth. Russia may have been the first one to weaponize it against a perceived adversary, but Iran, China, and other states not that far behind. Here's how we know. So this is an ad that we have discovered just last week. It was published by CGTN, which is a Chinese state-funded news outlet that publishes in English. And it shared an ad where we can see a video of a red car with an American flag saying how much American automotive industry will be hurt by the tariffs imposed by the US on China. Now, this ad was not attributed, and it wasn't clear that it was funded by a Chinese government-sponsored news outlet, and Facebook rightfully removed it. Now, this is the kind of influence campaign that's not necessarily disinformation, but it is influencing nevertheless, because it was targeting explicitly Americans of voting age. Another example comes from Iran. Back in August, FireEye identified a network of Iranian-run news outlets and social media accounts that were targeting American and Latin American audiences. And here's an example of one of these websites. It has published a very flattering interview with a pro-Iranian journalist, in which he claims that Iran's democratic system is far more fair-minded than the American system. Now, in and of itself, everyone is allowed to have an opinion, and there's nothing wrong with this article. However, the news outlet claims to be a civil society project run by independent journalists, when in fact, it's run by a state-sponsored entity in Tehran. So this underlines the growing danger of influence operations and disinformation campaigns, which are clearly not limited to one country or one target. It is important to understand, however, that this is only a tiny piece of the much larger hybrid threats puzzle that deserves a lot more attention, especially if we are talking about this concept of the new Cold War. In light of this progressing threat, the best way to build resilience is to make sure that critical thinking and social media literacy become commonplace skills like literacy and numeracy, ideally everywhere, but first and foremost in newsrooms. I was really shocked when I found out that 78% of journalists are sourcing their stories from social media, but only 18% of journalists know how to verify them online. So in the past 2 years, I have trained more than 200 journalists, researchers, and activists in identifying, analyzing, and countering disinformation. And what I can tell you is that the difference between a journalist who knows how to verify a news story from social media and one who doesn't is a 2-hour training session. I will conclude here. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am really excited to hear what the rest of the panel has to say. Thank you.
Very much, Donara.